This is Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert, and I'm Meredith. Here, we explore the taboo, less obvious, and paradoxical aspects of society. Questions that need nuanced answers, not just Google results. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to make a more curious future for everyone. Each episode is different, so bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. Today is a remastered favorite just in time for those summer barbecues. My guest gives practical tips on how to upgrade small talk into genuine and engaging conversation, even with family members, even with political conversations, and even with your boss's boss in an elevator. I particularly loved his tips on how to keep the conversation fresh with those closest to you, because we all know that the whole, "How was your day? It was fine," doesn't really deepen your relationships. If you end up liking this episode, you'll also like the one I did with an office introvert on how to thrive as a corporate introvert. It's episode 171. All right, friends, keep it curious. Have you ever had a really good conversation with someone? You know, you left feeling energized, connected, and heard, and you even learned something. You couldn't wait to meet again. And then in another conversation, sometimes even with that same person, it just felt like work. If you've been wondering how to recapture the secret sauce for skipping the small talk, this episode is for you. My next guest is a card-carrying introvert who started an improv group in college to fine-tune his communication and quick thinking. After getting his bachelor's in modern thought and literature from Stanford, he became senior director at Stand and Deliver, a leadership communication consulting firm. And he's also the co-author of What to Talk About on a Plane, at a cocktail party, in a tiny elevator with your boss's boss. Today, he'll be weighing in on 3 very specific scenarios and share how to turn small talk into real talk, so introverts and extroverts alike can break through the chit-chat and have more amazing conversations. Comedian, writer, professionally curious, Rob Baedeker. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks, Meredith. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. I love the contrast that you're like an introverted performer, especially an improv performer, because, you know, for most of us, that's like more horrifying than small talk.
Yeah. It's funny. I think it's not uncommon for performers to be introverts. I hear of, famous celebrities in Hollywood who are secretly introverted.
Yeah, and I'm definitely a part of that club, if it's a club. I don't think introverts really have clubs. We kind of gather separately in our own homes.
Right.
But I'm definitely a part of that. How has improv improved your conversation skills? Has it had an impact on it at all?
Yeah, I was terrified of performing. I think I still have a natural anxiety about getting in front of groups, although I've kind of made it my work, ironically. But what improv did for me, or at least the kind of improv I learned in college, was take away the pressure of being funny and being kind of in the spotlight. Patricia Ryan, who was my improv teacher, came at it from a really introvert-friendly way for me, because the concepts were all about making your partner look good on stage, being curious, paying attention, and telling a story. So what I had thought was like, get up on stage and tell jokes, just wasn't at all required, really. And you could be really good just by kind of being present and curious. So it was a huge, huge eye-opener for me.
Well, shout out to Miss Ryan, because that is part of the reason why I find podcasting so natural, is because it's not about me. My solo episodes are hands down the most horrifying, but those that are with other people, it's easy because the spotlight isn't really on me. It's on who this person is and getting to know them. But I've never connected that with conversation. So that's a really cool insight.
Yeah. I mean, there are other, I could go on forever about the sort of principles that were eye-opening, but another one is, and people have probably heard this, it's become pretty popular now, the kind of yes and attitude, saying yes to what improvisers call offers. And all an offer means is something another person does or says, or an object in the room, or something you notice. And so it's really about paying attention and saying yes, versus our kind of natural instinct to say yes, but, or block offers, as improvisers would say. So it's sort of a mindset shift that, again, as you said, takes the focus off of you and puts it on the world out there, other people, which is a huge relief for, as you said, a card carrying introvert.
Because I think some of the nervous energy comes when you, for some people at least, when you first meet someone and you're in a situation where you're expected to converse. And it's like, okay, maybe if you are an introvert, you probably hate small talk. Is there a minimum amount of small talk that's necessary? Is it socially acceptable just to like jump into deep topics? Like, is there a balance?
I think there's totally a balance. You have to read the room. And I think there is this like asymmetry. I think that's the word for it, actually, like psychological asymmetry, which means we are so expert in our own experience. We know ourselves like nobody else can. And we have such a hard time kind of thinking about what it's like to be another person. So I may go to a party and feel like super timid or reluctant and think, wow, everybody must be sort of shivering and afraid of small talk. But if you imagine the other end of the scenario, like I think a lot about, you're at a party and you learn someone's name and a few seconds later you forget it, which happens to all of us. Often I'm like, oh, I'm just mortified. I can't believe I forgot their name. I'm going to have to ask again and they'll be so offended. But when I flip it around and that happens to me and somebody says, sorry, I didn't catch your name, I don't care at all. Right. So it's like this asymmetry. And so to think, that other people don't want us to strike up a conversation is probably not true statistically, and there's, again, I was looking around at the research on this. Conversation with strangers tends to make people happier, even though a lot of us have sort of social anxiety about it or some degree of it, like some reluctance to chat with a stranger. But when you look at it, it improves mood and it improves well-being in general. So, it's a good thing, but we have a hard time, I think, seeing outside of our own hesitations. That makes sense.
It does make sense. And it's not that, well, me personally, it's not that I don't want to have a conversation with a stranger. I don't want to be stuck in a boring conversation with a stranger.
Yeah.
And I think it was in your book, you talk about asking for stories instead of answers as a way to convert small talk into slightly more upgraded conversation. Can you give some examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I'll answer that, but I want to pick up on something you said, which is getting out of a conversation. And I was at a party recently where a woman was so brilliant at this. My wife and I were talking to her. It was sort of a brief, like, nice enough conversation, but it wasn't going to go anywhere. And she just so generously said, well, it's been so nice talking to you, turned and left. Nobody was offended. Everybody was relieved. And again, I might think like, oh, if I did that, if I said nice to talk to you and left, they'd be offended. But I wasn't. I was glad. She was like doing the heavy lifting of ending the conversation, which has to end at some point. And
that is the part of conversation that I struggle with the most, because I give off therapist vibes. So, and I'm not a therapist, and I give off mom vibes, and I'm not a mom. So you can imagine those two qualities together. I get cornered frequently. And so
people want to share everything.
Totally. So you're saying I can just say, thanks for this conversation and leave like that. I didn't know that was an option.
Yeah. Or, I'm going to go over there.
I'm going to go over there.
That's a little more blunt.
Oh my God.
But I would experiment with those, again, the tone is everything. It's been great talking to you. Thank you. I'm going to get a drink. I've got to go. I mean, be honest.
Well, I always have to pee, so I'll just use that.
Perfect. Yeah. But I know what you mean. Yeah. You can, if you're a good listener or curious or give off those vibes, you can get cornered. Totally. But to your point, Meredith, on the other end, which is how do you turn sort of small, boring talk into something bigger? Those weren't your words. So correct me if I'm...
No, I think those were my words, actually. So you're good.
Yeah. I mean, I think first is like, do you want that? I mean, sometimes small talk is fine and we're not in the mood and it's just a social nicety. It's okay. But we've all had great conversations, like you said in the intro, with, an Uber driver or someone in an elevator where It's like, oh, I'm so glad I asked or they asked, and what a story they had. So, and like I said, this research says that generally it's good for us to interact with people as opposed to being on our phones. So, what Chris Collin, my co-author of What to Talk About Tonight, suggests is going beyond these sort of facile, like kind of dead end answers, which are like, "How you doing? What's up?" They are so vague and kind of binary that it leaves the conversation nowhere to go. So one I like is simply, and it's so simple, is just, what'd you do today? And it's easy to answer. And in that answer, you'll get like a dozen possibilities for follow-ups. Or, if you want to tiptoe and be more bold, what did you have for breakfast? Or, can you give me some advice? Like, you can kind of read, gauge the room and sort of step as unconventionally as you want. But something that lets people tell a story versus just say fine or I'm okay, or sort of squirm in that like general conversation template, I think that opens up stuff. And it's the specifics, right? So if I ask you what you did today, you have to be specific for that. And depending on what you say, I can just follow up on a dozen things, big or small.
I like that because it's not too catchy. It's not like, what would you do if you were president, or something weird like icebreaker youth group B?
People run the other way. But sometimes people like that, or if it's a group you kind of know already. There's a guy, Rob Walker, who I think does great work. He has a newsletter called The Art of Noticing, and he collects this list of icebreakers from his readers, and it's just an ongoing Google Doc. And some are sort of zany and out there, and some are really simpler like that. But I'm sure listeners can look that up. Rob Walker, The Art of Noticing. And I love that noticing is, part of his project as well. Which I think is the conversation, just actually noticing what's in front of you, what's being said, what's in the room. Harder than it's
it's kind of like the beginning of curiosity. So I like that too. Yeah. And I think I'd like to introduce our first scenario if you are feeling ready for it. Okay. So you are on your way to a family reunion and you have vowed not to be the weirdo who just plays with kids and dogs at parties. P.S. I am that weirdo. You're surrounded by people whose names and professions you should know, but you don't. And it's a little late in the game to say, Aunt Barb, tell me about yourself. So what are some strategies to have meaningful conversation with people who have changed your diapers?
Yes. Well, I would first kind of question the assumption that the playing with kids and dogs is a weirdo. I get where you're going, but that's kind of like a necessary role. Sometimes those kids they're pretty good. They're pretty honest, easy in some ways to connect with. Pets, even easier. So that's an important function that someone's playing. But I do get your point. And I would go back to those specifics. So I think I mentioned this one, but asking for advice is generally an invitation on something kind of universal, whether it's, I want to go on a vacation, but I don't have a huge budget, like anywhere you'd recommend. Commenting on something they're wearing. That's a cool necklace. What's the story? If you don't know the person, the history of their name can be an interesting way in. Again, it's sort of easy pickings for them. It's not too high pressure, but you'll get a story. And so specific questions and noticing what's in front of you. I find, in this one, Meredith, I find like almost always works in a situation where you don't know folks. If you hear what their work is, you can almost always say, I bet fill in the blank work has changed a lot in recent years. And I swear 99% of the time that will just like, they'll just, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe it, and they'll give you the whole history of the change of their industry, which is interesting, usually.
Those are brilliant. I am so excited to go to the next family reunion. Words I think I never would have thought would ever come out of my mouth. So we've done good work here so far, Rob. We've done good work. So family members are an interesting topic, though, because, we talk a lot about small talk with, I think you call them drive-by conversations, like grocery store clerks and bank tellers and that sort of thing. Yeah. But I think when we say small talk, we can all agree we're mostly meaning empty. conversation.
Yeah, right.
And with close family and friends that you see a lot, I think there is like a trap of slipping into a version of small talk with the
Hmm.
people that are closest in your life. I'm just curious if there's any like strategies to avoid that, to keep the conversation interesting and moving with the people that you see every day.
Yeah. Well, I think there you have a chance to be a little bolder if you want. And again, I would start with the premise that we always want that. Again, sometimes small talk is fine. I think that's why the weather comes up as a evergreen conversation topic. It's easy. Everybody can say something about it. And just that sort of social dance, I think is fine a lot of the times. But as you're suggesting, we often want more and we can get stuck in these ruts. So there's where I'd venture to be a little bolder. Chris and I have a range of kind of scenarios from mild to more provocative that you could prepare in advance. You know, what era would you want to time travel to? What is your sort of parallel universe profession? That's kind of on the edge of, most people have like an idea of, if I weren't doing X, I would have been an astronaut. That can be an interesting one for someone a little bit. And you can prepare these if you want. You could sort of study up for the next conversation. Something you read recently, a book you're reading. You can make an offer, as well as, to go back to the improv lingo, putting something out there, doing a bit of thinking beforehand, mentioning a book you're reading, mentioning a problem you're having. That's sort of taking the first step. And so it's a little bit of work, but in those situations, Meredith, it's worth the experiment to see if the depth pays off. It's an experiment. Not all this works, and part of it just takes a kind of resilience to say, all right, well, that didn't go anywhere. Next time I'll try something new, And like the good news is, like, nobody, especially in a party, like nobody cares about you, which is like great news to me. Instead of thinking like everybody is watching me and worried about what I'm going to do. It's such a self-centered view that I've fallen into. It's like everybody's thinking about themselves. So the good news is, like, if you mess up, flub in a conversation, no big deal. They're thinking about themselves.
I mean, what I'm hearing you say is practice this at a bar with drunk people. That's what I'm getting out of that.
Great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody will remember anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for family members, it sounds like you could even gamify it a little bit, like put all those questions in a bowl and pick them out, and it'd be a fun family game night.
Yeah, we after the book, published a set of cards that were meant exactly for that. What to talk about cards, which are prompts, sort of ranked from easy to challenging, and they're totally meant for that. I've actually tried them. They work. It's just like a little prop, it's kind of fun.
That's super fun. And speaking of preparing for, the conversation, something you said in your talk at Google was, before you go meet up with someone for like happy hour or whatever, get there early. And I think you use the term check in with yourself, which, as someone who goes to yoga class from time to time, I know what that means. Yeah. But can you explain for like maybe the typical Midwestern guy who does not do yoga, what does that mean and why should he do it for meeting up with his buddies? Yeah.
You're talking about Tim. Hi, Tim.
Yeah, Tim.
Yeah. So why should Tim bother to check in with us? I think credit Chris for this idea, which is really not about the content of the conversation. And in my work as a communication consultant and trainer, we talk a lot about state. This is with the Stand and Deliver group, which is your kind of psychological, emotional condition before. With our work at Stand and Deliver, it's before you get in front of your team or have a difficult conversation, but it's got nothing to do with the content. But we all know the way we feel can make or break a conversation. If it's an important conversation, and even in a social setting, it's more of our state of being that's coming across above and beyond the content. So check in with yourself means, where are you? Like where are you mentally, emotionally? It doesn't have to be a big deal, but instead of dragging whatever meeting you were just in into the next one, or walking to the room without thinking, take a breath, remind yourself why you're there, and clear your mind. That's, back to kind of the yoga prep, I think.
But
Reset.
it works. Yeah, I like that reset. That definitely works. I also liked a concept that I can't remember if you wrote about it or spoke about it, but it was a concept of disruption, like doing or saying something unexpected. My personal favorite is a well-placed insult. I find that to be a delightful icebreaker. It can come across as flirty, so
Okay.
it has backfired from time to time, but I would love for you to explain why disruption works and, while you're at it, how I can come across as less flirty.
All right. Those are two big questions. So yeah, disruption, I think you've got to gauge the room, sort of judge folks' tolerance for something kind of out of left field. I think we're all in a positive way. Flirtation is sort of a positive, gender neutral kind of way of expressing an energy or curiosity. But I think I get what you're saying, which is that line of not wanting to go into a certain kind of flirtation. But there's a kind of danger there, right? There's a kind of like, I'm doing something unexpected that can sort of wake people up who are sort of sleepwalking through a conversation.
Exactly.
My wife did this, I think, brilliantly the other night. We were talking to a guy who said he had worked for this really wealthy investor years ago. And I said, is he still the number one wealthiest guy and wherever? The guy said no. And my wife said, is that because of the investment advice you gave him? It's sort of a light jab. But he took a beat and he laughed, and it's clearly a joke, but it just sort of broke the pattern. So that kind of, insult in quotes, I think is fun. And as we say in the book, sort of picking a sort of left turn topic, if you feel like the audience can handle it, is fun. Have you ever been ripped off is one that most people have a story about. That's not too radical, but I might be collecting stories about people getting ripped off. I'm sure many people listening can think of a time when they got ripped off, which is already a story. And again, we'll provide you like a ton of follow-up questions. So a slight left turn or a hard left turn, depending on like how you think the room will handle it. The room, I mean the other person. And then to your point, how do you navigate the flirtation line? Beats me.
Well, yeah, you can't really control how people interpret things, but a theme I'm seeing throughout is asking for the story and not just a yes or no answer. So I feel like that is definitely a clear takeaway. I would love to do scenario number 2 with you, if you're ready. So this scenario is you're invited to a party where you only know the host. In the spirit of meeting new people, you attend. You quickly discover everyone's favorite topic is what you consider the wrong side of a political viewpoint. Mm-hmm. What's the best way to have meaningful conversation without starting a riot?
Great question. Yeah, this is a tricky one. I think we've all been there these days. It's trickier than ever. I think the advice to avoid politics and religion is generally good.
Yeah.
With this scenario, I would really start with the outcome. And I'm, again, bringing this from my work as a communication consultant with Stand and Deliver, where we're always asking, what's the outcome of this talk or conversation? So this is going to seem like a long way around, but I remember my daughter was probably 4 years old. I was picking her up from a camp, and we were getting to our car, and I hear this honking and yelling. I'm holding her hand. This guy steps out of this big SUV. It's parked right behind us, and starts yelling that I had parked too close to his car. He couldn't get out. I looked. It was tight, but there was plenty of space. I wanted to tell him, like, do you want me to pull your car out for you? I didn't say that. but he kept yelling and screaming and coming at me. He comes up to me and bumps my chest. And I had two reactions, like blood just filled my face.
Yeah.
And so the first reaction was like a physical retaliation. The second was, I'm going to prove that I'm right, because I was totally right. There was a little bit of space, but there was plenty of space for him to pull his car out, right? So like my instinct was to prove him right, which was totally ridiculous, like totally not a desirable outcome. But that's where my mind went in the moment. In that case, of course, my outcome was like, get out of here, keep my daughter safe. I got her in the car, we left and never saw the guy. That was a good outcome. So I bring that back to this scenario because I would start with the outcome, which might be on that visceral level, like the emotional level. Well, these people are wrong. I'm going to prove that I'm right, which we can all see from a distance. Like, how's that going to go? So you're going to convert a whole party of people over to your opinion? Probably not. So what else is an outcome? Like, one, maybe you decide you want to learn, like, how could somebody that takes this like wildly different opinion than I have get there? Like, so back to curiosity, like, could I approach this like a reporter? And my outcome is simply to learn. I had an Uber or Lyft ride where the driver, it was like a 2-hour ride in traffic to the airport. And he brought up in the middle of it an opinion that I found totally opposite of mine. So my first impulse was like to disabuse him and educate him and prove that I was right. Of course, that wasn't going to happen. So I and I'm not always able to do this, but I thought, let me just see if I can understand how he arrived here. So that turned out to be a much better outcome for me, like a much better experience, I think, for both of us. So in this party, I would first say, what's my outcome really? It's and if it's like, convert every person here to my correct point of view, probably not great. So maybe it's like I could come at this like an anthropologist or a reporter and learn. It's probably going to be a better experience for everyone.
That is a much kinder, like inner dialogue than what I have historically.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying I do that all the time.
Well, I'm just because I'm thinking about like sometimes when I am witnessing or speaking with people that I'm like, oh my God, who ties your shoes? I pretend that they are developmentally challenged, and it helps me be nice to them. But how mean is that compared to what you just said? I'm gonna have to like change over and do.
I don't know. I mean, if nobody knows what your story is, like.
Well, now everyone knows because we're on a podcast.
Everyone knows, yeah. Be careful next time you talk to Meredith. Oh, wow, she's so nice, and she speaks so slowly and such simple.
She patted my head. Oh, God.
That's right. The head patting, it's usually
that'll be a giveaway. If I pat your head.
Yeah, it's time to go.
Time.
I will say this is a physician heal thyself kind of moment. Like that's theoretically what I would love to do. I don't always get there. Okay. And sometimes like with the car, with that like chest bump guy, like the answer is to leave. And it's harder to do if it's a friend, but like I know I'm not gonna be at my best self here. So I'm gonna find a way to gracefully leave.
Hey, Curiositors, just a quick pause to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals. From time to time, I recommend other podcasts you might like. And here's one I know that you're going to love. It's the Jordan Harbinger Show. I love it because it's smart without being too highbrow and 1,000% ADD friendly. I know, you love it already. I'm a genuine true fan. When I have time to listen to podcasts just for pleasure, not, guest research, the Jordan Harbinger Show is my automatic choice. It's like when you're hungry and someone asks you what you want, and then before you even have a minute to think about it, you find yourself at Chick-fil-A because, obviously, Jordan's the Chick-fil-A of podcasts. Some of my favorites include the one with the man held hostage by Somali pirates, that's episode 115, and the pain psychologist about how pain lives in the brain, not in the body, episode 661. You can't go wrong with adding the Jordan Harbinger Show to your rotation. It's incredibly interesting, and there's never a dull show. Search for The Jordan Harbinger Show, that's HARB as in boy, IN as in Nancy, GER, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. This episode is also brought to you by InSec. I don't just recommend them because they've been such a huge support of the show since day one. Their approach to pest control just puts my mind at ease. Their management plans are based on proper pest identification, not just blasting everything. With an emphasis on avoiding non-target species. One of the owners is a beekeeper, so pollinator respect is always top of mind. They take time to ask the right questions, and their work is guaranteed. But don't wait till the last minute to get on their schedule. If you're in the Florida Panhandle or Gulf Coast of Alabama, give them a call, enscc.net. This episode is also supported by the UWF Historic Trust. Listen, a lot of you come to Florida for vacation, and there's something you need to know. Sometimes it rains here, and sometimes you tourists you spray sunscreen and fry yourselves on the first day. So don't plan your Pensacola trip without also getting tickets to the UWF Historic Trust. It's good for a whole week, and it's a great indoor activity option. You'll recognize Trader John's where I record the show in the Pensacola Museum of History. Get your tickets in person so you can show an agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. Visit historicpensacola.org. Now back to the show. Remember to stay till the end where I give you a sneak peek of next week's episode.
Fair enough. I think a lot of us get trapped in that very emotional response. Like, I'm going to take this opportunity to prove I'm right. I've never seen that work. I don't know. Have you?
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. Do you feel like there's specific considerations for introverts versus extroverts when having or trying to have meaningful conversations?
Well, first of all, thank goodness for the extroverts. I mean, they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I met a kid, it's funny when you see a really extroverted kid. The other day, I was talking to like a 9-year-old, and she's like, "So, how you doing? Tell me what
Oh my God.
what are your plans for the week?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's more, more present and like leaderly than I am." But it's important work to put out the first move and make offers. So, as an introvert, what's been super helpful to me is this kind of inner game. Back when you talked about checking in with yourself. So if I'm going to a party, it's like, what's my story here? Is it that everybody is, going to be clinging to my every word? It's such a self-centered point of view. I remember a class in college, like a seminar. There's like 15 people in there, and you would all sit around this big table and speak. And I remember I can still feel this in my body, like having something to say and feeling my heart pounding and feeling sweat under my arms and like working up the courage. Like, after she speaks, I'm going to say my idea, and feeling like everybody was like, close up camera, like waiting for me, which is such a self-absorbed, such a self-absorbed point of view. Like, they didn't care. They were thinking about the thing they were going to say. So I'm kind of repeating this point, was getting over yourself. Like, yes, you may feel sort of heightened and sensitive, and that's all real, but it's okay. Like, people aren't noticing it, and they're probably feeling the same. So for introverts, I would start with that sort of baseline, examine your story, your state, and see if there's a better, more useful way to go into this for you and the people in this situation. How can I help people out? I mean, I think that's a good one for introverts. It is for me. Instead of like, what am I going to say that's going to be fascinating? Like, how can I make it easier for the people at this party? They don't know anybody here either. So maybe I can be of service, like by coming prepared or making offers or paying attention. That sort of turns the tables for me. Then it's not about me being witty or charming or smart. It's like, I'm going to try to make this easier for them.
Yeah, I love that. As an introvert, I could just, when you said you felt the nervousness in your body, as an introvert, when you said the point about thinking about others, like I felt that in my body. That felt like,
cool.
Oh yeah.
Right. I can do that.
That is where I feel the most comfortable, because I have been in some crazy, like uncomfortable situations that I put myself in. And when I think about others, like try to make other people comfortable, that is what makes me the best version of what I can be in that moment. So
totally.
I love that example. Okay, let's do scenario number 3, our last scenario before we close. So in this scenario, you are climbing the corporate ladder in a family run business, okay?
Oh boy.
Where it's all about who you know. One day, your boss's boss steps into the elevator with you. How do you make yourself memorable?
Oh, this is a tough one, Meredith. Okay, there's like multiple layers. We're in the elevator. It's a short ride. It's my boss's boss, family-run business, and I'm climbing the corporate ladder. So I'm making assumptions that this character is sort of an ambitious ladder climber, but I'll sort of check that and say, yeah, like, this is this fictional me is an honest person who wants to make an impression. There is a great scene from the show Mad Men And if anybody knows that show, it doesn't matter if you know, but there's a character, Pete Campbell, who he's a pretty kind of cheesy salesman. But there's a great scene where he's at a dinner. This is not too dissimilar. I think it's Don Draper's father-in-law, who's a French academic. And Pete Campbell sits down at dinner and starts to describe his job. He's an account manager at an ad agency. And the French guy's like, but I didn't understand. What do you do? And Pete Campbell, and you can find this on YouTube, Google like Pete Campbell explaining what he does. Pete Campbell says, well, Emil, I understand you're an academic. He says, yeah. He says, and what I hear is your work is quite pioneering, something like that. And the French guy says, yeah. He said, I bet the world would be a lot better off if more people knew about what you do. And the guy says, well, of course. And Pete says, that, Emil, is what I do. So I bring that in because this is the theme, right? Instead of me using that 30 seconds to like recite my resume, that I actually get curious, ask or learn something about him or her. I forget who this relative was. And then frame whatever I have to say in terms of their story.
That is brilliant. I love that. It reminds me of, I think something else I read in a different book that says, if you are on an airplane with someone and you facilitate conversation in a way that they talk about themselves the whole time, both of you will leave that airplane, but the other person will say to themselves, oh, wow, she's the most interesting person I've ever spoken to, because it was all about them.
Yeah. And you said something at the very beginning, I think, which is about being heard in a conversation, which I think is so overlooked. And simply acknowledging what you're hearing can make a conversation feel so profound. I mean, it sounds so simple, but I love the phrase, it sounds like. So I'm listening to you. It's like, wow, it sounds like you're in between jobs and you really want to find whatever. And you're not parroting what you hear, but you're acknowledging, you're making them feel heard. And that's magic, I think.
It is magic. And this conversation was magic. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I
so enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me.
Can you give a shout out of where people can buy your book, cyber stalk you on the internet, all the things?
Yeah, I heard of this thing called Google. I think you,
right.
Yeah, anyway, Google it, you'll find it. Our books are on Amazon. I've written several with the Casper Hauser Comedy Group, Books of Comedy. I work with the Stand and Deliver Group. We do leadership training and consulting for teams and leaders all over the place. So I'm somewhat easy to find.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. This was amazing.
Thanks, Meredith. Really appreciate you inviting me.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, you'll also like the one I did with an office introvert on how to thrive as a corporate introvert. That's episode 171. Stay tuned next week for an episode that I recorded while in Mongolia with a local YouTuber on the contrast between upholding traditions and staying relevant. Until then, keep it curious.